From a 12-year-old boy to savior of the world in less than a year, Aang sure grows fast in Avatar: The Last Airbender. But so does the rest of the gang. The Sword Master, the Blood Bender, the world's very first Metal Bender. Let's check out how the gang goes from children to champions in this skill evolution playlist.
And if you want more heroism, watch Avatar: Braving the Elements here on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
How did a 12-year-old boy become the most powerful man on the planet?
Sometimes I forget what a powerful bender that kid is.
As we study the evolution of Aang's power, we'll be exploring his growth in all 4 elements. Each will have skills that demonstrate functional and combative proficiency. We'll also check out his connection to the Avatar state, the spirit world, and energy bending. Born into the air nomads, Aang began to master airbending before he even knew he was the Avatar. At age 6, he was a better airbender than kids twice his age. By 10, he was better than his own teachers. And by 12, he invented the air scooter.
First, you form the ball, then you gotta get on quick.
Despite his youthfulness, he had already earned the ceremonial tattoos of a master airbender, the youngest in history. But the fun and games would soon end.
We have known you were the Avatar for some time.
Normally, we would have told you of your identity when you turned 16, but there are troubling signs.
I fear that war may be upon us, young Avatar.
We need you, Aang.
This moment changed Aang's life. Everything he cared for was about to be ripped away. So he attempted to flee from his destiny. When a storm threatened his and Appa's life, Aang used his yet unrealized Avatar powers to seal them both inside a ball of frozen energy for the next 100 years.
Next thing I knew, I was waking up in your arms after you found me in the iceberg. What's going on here?
You tell us. How'd you get in the ice? And why aren't you frozen?
I'm not sure.
They began a journey north in search of a waterbending teacher. And on that journey, we saw just how powerful airbending could be. On a functional level, Aang could fly with the help of his glider, leap great distances, and so much more. Although the first time Aang would airbend in combat would be against Prince Zuko of the Fire Nation royal family.
Looking for me?
You're the airbender? You're the Avatar?
Aang grew up among the peaceful air nomads. Violence doesn't come naturally to pacifists, but Aang did have one trick up his road. What? Did Aang just spontaneously master waterbending?
How did you do that? With the water! It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I don't know. I just sort of did it.
Spoiler alert, Aang had tapped into a spiritual mindset called the Avatar state. For the second time, actually.
The Avatar state is a defense mechanism designed to empower you with the skills and knowledge of all the past avatars. The glow is the combination of all your past lives, focusing the energy through your body.
It'd be a little while before Aang learned this fact. But one thing was clear. This was his most powerful skill, even if it was more of a reflex. Now back to bending. Aang had several action-packed encounters that continued to build his combative airbending.
Typical airbender tactic. Avoid and evade.
Aang was taught that fighting should only be a counter-reaction, which is why his defense was naturally great. But Aang was now learning offense too. Before long, he could float like a flutterbat and sting like a scorpion bee. He began to demonstrate air blades, projectile tunnels, and even fan blasts. It was as if his airbending couldn't get any better. So what about his waterbending? Well, not so fast. While on the journey north, Aang discovered one other ability, his connection to the spirit world.
You must be the Heibai spirit. My name is...
Being the Avatar means you're infused with Rava, the spirit of light and peace. You have the capacity to act as a bridge between the mortal world and the spirit world. A skill Aang flexed prematurely.
The sun is rising. Perhaps he will return soon.
What? No, I'm right here.
After accidentally projecting himself into the spirit world, we eventually learned there were other ways to communicate with spirits. Methods like meditation or through ceremonial shrines, which is how Aang first spoke to his previous incarnation.
It's good to see you, Aang. What took you so long?
Talking with the late Avatar Roku revealed quite a bit.
Mastering the elements takes years of discipline and practice. But if the world is to survive, you must do it by summer's end.
I haven't even started waterbending and we're still weeks away from the North Pole. What am I gonna do?
Calm down, it's gonna be okay. If you want, I can try and teach you some of the stuff I know.
You do that?
Time for Waterbending 101.
Just push and pull the water like this. The key is getting the wrist movement right.
Like this?
Aang was quick at learning the basics, much to Katara's chagrin.
Wow, I can't believe you got that so quickly. It took me 2 months to learn that move.
Well, you had to figure it out all on your own. I'm lucky enough to have a great teacher.
There may be other reasons why this came so naturally to Aang. As an air nomad, he's used to meditating, focusing on the energy around him. While waterbenders, they rely on their own flow of energy. You might compare it to like using the same variables in different math equations.
Looks like I got the hang of that move. What else you got?
That's enough practicing for today.
Aang quickly exhausted Katara's toolbox of waterbending basics, though their joint education was not drying up just yet.
Look at this, Aang. It's a waterbending scroll. Check out these crazy moves.
The team discovered some rare instructions, which included the water whip. And when the pirates they stole that scroll from hunted down Team Avatar, Aang and Katara explored collaborative bending.
We need a team of rhinos to budge this ship.
A team of rhinos, or 2 waterbenders.
Collaboration would help them move ships, create whirlpools, pull water from deep underground, and even manipulate clouds. This is the first time Aang demonstrated the abstract art of cloud bending, a combination of air and water bending, perfect for warning a superstitious village against pending doom.
Oh my!
Oh, and when that pending doom erupted, Aang's current skill set was put on display. Interestingly enough, Aang's predecessor, Avatar Roku, he actually perished in a similar conquest. I guess lessons can transcend lifetimes. Eventually, Team Avatar made it to the North Pole, where Aang studied under Master Pakku. Now, Aang may have been a talented student, but his discipline was that of a 12-year-old boy.
Pupil Aang,
Yes, Master Pakku?
care to step into the sparring circle? I figure since you found time to play with house pets, you must have already mastered waterbending.
I wouldn't say mastered, but check this out.
Aang's enrollment in Pakku University came to an end when the Fire Nation attacked. Time for Aang's first major test, stopping the Siege of the North. His combative airbending broke up the Fire Nation's most destructive tools, and he used his limited knowledge of the spirit world to seek additional help. This was the first time Aang entered the spirit world through meditation, and when all hope seemed lost, Aang tapped into the Avatar state to actually merge with the spirit of the ocean. Together, they eliminated the Fire Nation threat. For now. But what would this mean for his education?
I've decided to go to the South Pole.
What about Aang? He still needs to learn waterbending.
Well, then he better get used to calling you Master Katara.
Still, Aang had more to learn, and it would continue under Katara's guidance. Now, if finding a waterbending master was a journey, finding an earthbending teacher would be more of a hunt. Their first choice only wanted to manipulate Aang. This guy wanted to force our young Avatar into the powerful, destructive Avatar state, even if it meant using Katara as bait.
It worked! It worked!
On the flip side, this is when Roku elaborated on just what the Avatar state actually was, the good and the bad.
It's time you learned. In the Avatar state, you are at your most powerful. But you are also at your most vulnerable.
What do you mean?
If you are killed in the Avatar state, the reincarnation cycle will be broken, and the Avatar will cease to exist.
Quite the caveat, don't you think? Aang pocketed this information and chose not to study earthbending under such a careless master.
We just have to find out a way to control you when you're like that.
You're out of your mind.
The hunt for an earthbending master continued, while Aang and Katara practiced their waterbending skills. Witness the octopus form. And that's not the only muscle he'd exercise.
Everything is connected.
He'd further embrace his spiritual connections in this mysterious swamp, whose hallucinations actually led to his future earthbending teacher.
Your champion, the Blind Bandit!
AKA Toph Beifong.
She's the greatest earthbender I've ever seen.
She may have been blind, but learning from the original earthbenders, badger moles, taught her unparalleled talent. Now, teaching that to Aang was easier said than done.
Maybe there's another way. What if I came at the boulder from a different angle?
No, that's the problem. You've got to stop thinking like an airbender. There's no different angle, no clever solution, no trickety trick that's gonna move that rock. You've got to face it head on. And when I say head on, I mean like this. Huh!
Whoa! As an air nomad, the methodology behind earthbending wasn't connecting with Aang. He was used to going with the flow, not brute force. The root of earthbending was essentially the opposite of airbending. Toph practically turned over every stone trying to teach Aang, until he was forced to use brute force to protect Sokka.
Do it now! Earthbend, Twinkle Toes. You just stood your ground against a crazy beast. Do it! You did it! You're an earthbender.
I can't believe it!
And there it is. Aang unlocked the earthbending mindset.
Appa! Appa! I can earthbend now. The key is being completely rooted, physically and mentally unmovable. Whoa!
This was finally a tool whose offensive benefits came naturally. Like when he needed to defend himself against the Fire Nation princess Azula. Or when Team Avatar had to break into the Earth Kingdom Palace. Check out Aang's devastating pillar wave. Aang's comfort with earthbending developed rapidly, fueled by escalating conflict in a corrupt Earth Kingdom.
You're the Avatar?
No, him.
Over here.
As Team Avatar began to witness the complexity of war, Aang decided to break away from bending and refocus on his most powerful skill.
You said you could teach me to gain control of the Avatar state. How?
You must gain balance within yourself before you can bring balance to the world.
Mastering the Avatar state would require opening all his chakras, which are sort of pools of energy in your body.
Each pool of energy has a purpose and can be blocked by a specific kind of emotional muck. Be warned. Opening the chakras is an intense experience, and once you begin this process, you cannot stop until all 7 are open.
Aang accepted the risk and moved forward. In the process, the Avatar surrendered his fears, released his guilt. But when it came to letting go of earthly ties, especially when Katara was suddenly in mortal danger,
I have to go!
No, Aang. By choosing attachment, you have locked the chakra. If you leave now, you won't be able to go into the Avatar state at all.
Aang left to rescue Katara, and he found her. But it led to a battle against Azula and Zuko. He was using some powerful bending techniques. Aang even took a chapter from Toph's playbook and made gemstone armor. But when it seemed like the only option left was the unmastered Avatar state, it did not go well. the beginning of the end. Summer was heating up. Aang mastered airbending, was a great waterbender, proficient earthbender. But now he could no longer access the Avatar state, not with his chakra locked. On top of that, they had no idea where to find a firebending master. Actually, Aang had found a firebending master long before he was ready to learn.
Before learning firebending, you must learn water and earth. Water is cool and soothing. Earth is steady and stable. But fire is alive. It breathes, it grows. Without the bender, a rock will not throw itself. But fire will spread and destroy everything in its path if one does not have the will to control it.
The master was right. When Aang persisted, he learned firsthand that playing with fire is not child's play.
Katara! I'm so sorry!
After burning Katara, Aang swore off firebending. But with the war coming to an apex, he now knew there was no other option. Still, his search for a teacher wasn't looking good, until a teacher found him.
Hello, Zuko here.
Zuko's own complicated struggle left him a changed man. And as the great-grandson of Avatar Roku, who better to teach Aang firebending?
What was that? That was the worst firebending I've ever seen.
I thought it was nice.
On second thought, maybe Zuko wouldn't be the best teacher. He had essentially lost his ability to firebend. Firebending had been largely taught as an act of destruction, fueled by your most aggressive emotions.
I don't want to rely on hate and anger anymore. There has to be another way.
You're gonna need to learn to draw your firebending from a different source. I recommend the original source.
Eventually, they found that source. Dragons! Ran and Shaw were the original masters of firebending. And they deemed Aang and Zuko worthy enough to impart the burning art's true nature.
All this time, I thought firebending was destruction. But now I know what it really is. It's energy and life.
Finally, he had mastered firebending. He had achieved control over every element, and he did it in a way that would make the monks proud. All that was left was to save the world. The end of summer was here. Fire Lord Ozai was preparing to eliminate the entire Earth Kingdom. It appeared Aang's only choice was to kill Ozai to maintain balance, though he knew death couldn't be the only answer. To find another option, Aang was able to ask his past selves, even while the Avatar state was still locked.
You must be decisive.
Only justice will bring peace.
You must actively shape your own destiny and the destiny of the world.
No one gave him the answer he wanted to hear. All signs still pointed towards a violent end, until one, even older advisor.
Darkness thrives in the void, but always yields to purifying light.
What did this mean? Too late to figure it out. Ozai was in action, which meant it was time for Aang's final test.
Please listen to me. We don't have to fight. You have the power to end it here and stop what you're doing.
I do have the power. I have all the power in the world!
Aang put on an impressive performance, but when redirecting lightning, a potential death blow to Ozai, he couldn't do it. Ozai took advantage and eventually backed our hero into a corner. Then finally, when all hope was lost, destiny knocked. Like earthly acupuncture, Aang's chakra was unlocked, and the Avatar state was ready to take no prisoners. The moment of truth. Would he slay the Fire Lord? Would his past lives compel him to do the unthinkable? No. Deep down in his heart, Aang knew that life wasn't the enemy. Ozai's life was not the enemy. Power was the enemy. So Aang took Ozai's power away. That's right, Aang used the unknown power of energy bending to remove Ozai's power, eliminating the tyrant's firebending altogether. At 12 years old, Avatar Aang mastered all 4 elements. He saved the world, and he refused to let his own power corrupt his internal harmony. Beyond that, he mastered control over the Avatar state, discovered energy bending, and maintained a deep connection with the spirit world. After the 100-Year War, he'd continued to fight for peace, helped create Republic City, started a family with Katara, and after passing on, Aang would guide the next Avatar, as Roku had once done for him.
When we hit our lowest point, we are open to the greatest change.
Sokka, look! I caught one!
How did a young waterbender who could barely catch a fish turn into this aquatic authority? Let's take a deep dive to see how Katara went from turtle duck to sea serpent. To break down the evolution of Katara's skills, we're going to explore these subdivisions of waterbending: functional, combative, healing, and bloodbending.
I don't know if I want that kind of power.
Now let's start back at the very beginning. Katara was the only individual in the Southern Water Tribe who had the gift. Because of that, she was forced to teach herself the basics. Her skills were, admittedly, clumsy and unrefined. Her brother Sokka was often a victim to the backfire.
Why is it that every time you play with magic water, I get soaked?
It's not magic, it's water bending. And it's...
Yeah, an ancient art unique to our culture, blah, blah, blah.
But even if it was unrefined, Katara certainly had great power. Power that, at least here in the beginning, would be influenced by her emotions.
Okay, you've gone from weird to freakish, Katara.
It was that emotional outburst that would release the Avatar, setting off an epic chain of events to save the world from the Fire Nation.
Uncle, do you realize what this means?
I won't get to finish my game.
It means my search. It's about to come to an end.
And actually, while we're on the topic of emotional outbursts, you might say Katara's fear was the first thing that triggered her combative potential. Living in the southernmost corner of the planet, it's no surprise that she had a natural inclination to ice bend. In fact, trapping foes in ice would become a mainstay of her techniques. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Depending on the exact state of her emotions, Katara's bending could suffer.
Oh, I'm glad you know.
I'm glad you're glad.
Good.
Fine.
Frustration may have impaired her skills, but love had Katara bending fast and with surgical accuracy. This was the first time we'd watched Katara waterbend something she couldn't actually see.
Don't ride the Unagi. Not fun.
You could also say this hinted to her future as a healer. Katara's relationship with Aang would drive her practice and education moving forward.
If you want, I can try and teach you some of the stuff I know.
You'd do that?
Of course, she only knew to teach the very basics of functional waterbending.
This is a pretty basic move, but it still took me months to perfect.
That is, until Team Avatar made a titanic discovery.
Look at this, Aang. It's a waterbending scroll.
That scroll and the mutual help from Aang would begin building her combative toolbox.
Hey, you did the water whip.
I couldn't have done it without your help.
The water whip became Katara's first learned attack, as opposed to the defensive instincts witnessed earlier. Around this time, Katara and Aang also began to learn the power of collaborative bending. It would come in handy for directing large objects and manipulating natural resources.
Yes!
In a new milestone, it was a collaboration with Aang in which Katara first performed cloud bending.
Oh my!
An abstract art that managed to warn a village about pending calamity. As time passed, Katara's understanding of functional bending would build, where she could barely create a wave. She would soon do so without second guessing. With Katara's functional skills rising, even feeding her potential in combat, she'd step away from both and take a dive into one of her most important gifts: healing.
You have healing abilities. The great benders of the water tribe sometimes have this ability. Water brings healing and life.
Healing came to Katara organically, and good thing too. Without it, who knows what shape Team Avatar would have been in.
Wow, that's good water.
When did you learn how to do that?
I guess I always knew.
Learning to heal would be a major milestone for Katara. And another, finding herself a waterbending teacher. Though that wouldn't come as easily.
I've waited for this day my whole life. I finally get to learn from a real waterbending master.
Good morning, Master Paku!
No, please, march right in. I'm not concentrating or anything.
This is my friend, Katara.
In our tribe, it is forbidden for women to learn waterbending.
Despite raining on her parade, Katara refused to take no for an answer.
Fine. You want to learn to fight so bad? Study closely. Well, I'm impressed. You are an excellent waterbender.
But you still won't teach me, will you?
No.
Her frustration led to an impressive outburst. But that's not what persuaded Master Paku.
Come back here! I'm not finished yet!
Yes, you are. This is my necklace.
No, it's not. It's mine. Give it back!
I made this 60 years ago. For the love of my life. For Kana.
My Gran was supposed to marry you?
Just like Katara had spent so long managing her own emotions, Master Paku gave in to his and agreed to train this determined young woman.
Katara, you've advanced more quickly than any student I've ever trained. You have proven that with fierce determination, passion, and hard work, you can accomplish anything.
Katara mastered the Northern Tribe's teachings just in time for her first major test, protecting Aang against Prince Zuko.
I see you've learned a new trick, but I didn't come this far to lose to you.
She was successful under the guidance of the moon. But once the sun fueled Zuko's flame, Katara was in hot water. Still, she had more to learn. After the incident in the north, Katara would continue to train with Aang and refine her combative skills, for better or for worse.
How are you gonna fight without your bending?
Well, in addition to her bending powers, Katara would begin showcasing her unique strategic problem solving.
How'd you get them to tell you?
Oh, a girl has her ways.
Whether it was strong-arming informants or even biblically parting the seas, Katara's functional skills would get Team Avatar past many roadblocks. And as for combat, we'd soon see one of her most distinct and versatile weapons. Bending water as a literal extension of her arms. This was especially useful in her next major test, a battle alongside Aang against Prince Zuko and his merciless sister, Azula. Katara's aqua arms would be key in keeping Zuko at bay. But when Aang went down after being hit by a bolt of lightning, she went from fight to flight for the sake of her friend. Thankfully, her healing skills, coupled with some special water from the northern tribe's Spirit Oasis.
The water has unique properties. Don't lose it.
Well, that was enough to wake up Aang, but not heal him completely. Katara's gift, no matter how strong, wasn't enough to restore Aang's connection to his past selves. And by this point, the war against the Fire Nation was in full force. But so was Katara's mastery of waterbending. In combat, she was vital in keeping ships afloat and escaping enemy capture. She was learning new skills, too. We would eventually see Katara mudbend for the first time.
Guys, I thought we were supposed to be training me.
And in a pinch, Katara discovered that she could use her own sweat for strategic gain.
Katara, you're a genius!
But it was one spooky night in a Fire Nation forest that led Katara to an ominous new mentor.
Sorry to frighten you. My name is Hama.
Hama was secretly a waterbender from the Southern Water Tribe. Hiding in a Fire Nation forest, she had spent her whole life fighting for survival. And because of that, Hama was able to teach Katara many valuable lessons, like how to pull water from thin air and from the surrounding vegetation.
That was incredible. It's a shame about the lilies, though.
Hama's disregard for life and hunger for survival led to an unthinkable new technique.
Blood bending. Controlling the water in another body. Enforcing your own will over theirs.
Katara initially refused to learn the dark art until Hama retaliated. She turned Aang and Sokka into human puppets. Like in the past, Katara's love for others guided her to an incredible leap in ability.
Congratulations, Katara. You're a bloodbender.
Katara would only bloodbend one other time, when pursuing the man responsible for her mother's death.
What's happening to me?
As grim as it was, this quest would demonstrate just how far Katara had come. From her strategic functional bending,
we need to be stealthy and make sure no one spots us,
to her dynamic combat skills. And even when the old man was in her crosshairs, she had enough emotional control to know right from wrong.
I did a bad thing. I know I did, and you deserve revenge. So why don't you take my mother? That would be fair.
I always wondered what kind of person could do such a thing. But now that I see you, I think I understand. There's just nothing inside you. Nothing at all. You're pathetic and sad and empty.
Please spare me.
Sozin's Comet, the Fire Nation's source of super-powered bending, would arrive soon after, thus marking the climax of our hero's journey.
We can take Azula.
I'm not worried about her.
Katara faced the threat of extinction with a masterful grace. Katara put an end to Azula by trapping the madwoman in ice. A powerful parallel of the very first combative move we saw from her long ago. She also used her healing powers to save an enemy turned ally, Zuko, showcasing the most important quality of her power.
Water brings healing and life.
The comet passed, and in its wake, we were left with a fully realized hero. A waterbender, master in functional and combative bending, a gifted healer, and shockingly, a reserved bloodbender. As an adult, Katara would lead an effort to outlaw bloodbending altogether. She would also supervise Avatar Korra's training and assist in times of medical need. But as with every great bender, Katara had her limitations.
I've tried everything in my power, but I cannot restore Korra's bending.
But you're the best healer in the world. You have to keep trying.
I'm sorry, there's nothing else I can do.
Like with Avatar Aang's spiritual blockage, she was not always able to heal Avatar Korra. Nonetheless, Katara would go down in history as one of the greatest waterbenders we'd ever seen. No matter the age, she demonstrated passion, determination, hard work, and the power of emotions. Had she not stood up for herself on that fateful day, the world of Avatar would be a much different place.
You mean I did that?
With all of the powerful benders in the Avatar world, it's easy to overlook a non-bender like Sokka. And maybe at first he was at a disadvantage. But by the end of the series, Sokka had grown into a non-bending force to be reckoned with. So let's take a look at the evolution of Sokka. When Sokka's father went with the men of the Southern Water Tribe to fight in the war, Sokka, too young to go with them, was left behind, tasked by his father to take care of the home front. From that point on, Sokka saw himself as a warrior of the Southern Water Tribe.
Now, men, it's important that you show no fear when you face a firebender. In the Water Tribe, we fight to the last man standing. For without courage, how can we call ourselves men?
I gotta pee.
His skills, however, didn't quite match his self-given title. So when Sokka set out on his journey with Katara and Aang, he still had a lot to learn, especially if he wanted to hold his own with the benders he surrounded himself with. But his first lesson would be a lesson in ego and how it can hinder growth.
Sorry, ladies, didn't mean to interrupt your dance lesson. I was just looking for somewhere to get a little workout.
Sokka was a proud warrior, sometimes possibly too proud, set in a narrow-minded worldview.
Wait a second, there's no way a bunch of girls took us down.
By remaining closed-minded, Sokka was effectively cutting himself off from the vast knowledge he could gain from women like the Kyoshi warriors. So it wasn't until Suki forced him to confront this flaw that he was finally able to grow.
I would be honored if you would teach me.
Even if I'm a girl?
I'm sorry if I insulted you earlier. I was wrong.
We normally don't teach outsiders, let alone boys.
Please make an exception. I won't let you down.
Humbled and ready to learn, Sokka sought lessons from the Kyoshi warriors, and thus opened himself up to change, no longer letting pride get in the way of personal growth.
Wait for an opening and then...
Sokka also considered himself a skilled strategist, but his first real chance to demonstrate his cunning was during a visit to the Northern Air Temple, when he helped the Mechanist develop a clever way to locate an odorless gas.
If we put a whole mess of rotten eggs in the cellar where the gas seeps up,
the gas will mix with the smell of rotten eggs.
Then if there's a leak...
You smell rotten eggs. Then you just follow your nose to the place where the smell is coming from.
And plug up the hole where the gas is escaping.
You're a genius!
And even designed functioning war balloons to help fight off the Fire Nation.
If you control the hot air, you control the war balloon.
That's actually pretty smart.
By this point, his knowledge and experience fighting the Fire Nation, coupled with his knack for strategy, made him a valuable asset on the battlefield. Which is why during the Siege of the North, it was Sokka who instructed the Northern Water Tribe warriors on techniques for taking on the Fire Nation, and provided essential support.
Sokka, I want you to tell everything you know to Han. He's leading this mission.
More comfortable now in a leadership role, Sokka redoubled his efforts to keep Team Avatar on task, pushing them to spend their free time researching and gathering intel on the Fire Nation.
I'd like to spend my vacation at the library!
And it paid off, because their trip to the library provided them with vital information on how to best take on the Fire Nation.
The sun is behind the moon. It's a solar eclipse. It's literally the darkest day in Fire Nation history. Now I get it. Something awful happened on that day. I don't know what, but I do know why. Firebenders lose their bending during a solar eclipse.
Once considered a child, too young and inexperienced to fight with the men of the Southern Water Tribe, Sokka's growth was apparent when he next encountered his father, Hakoda.
Sokka.
Hi, Dad.
Sokka had matured into a valuable asset in the fight against the Fire Nation, and Hakoda's pride was evident as he counted his son among the men of the tribe.
What should I do, Dad?
Aren't you listening? I said the rest of you men get ready for battle.
From then on, Sokka dedicated himself to planning the invasion of the Fire Nation on the day of Black Sun. But while the rest of Team Avatar used their bending skills to accomplish remarkable tasks, it was clear that Sokka felt a bit self-conscious about his lack of any bending skill. Determined to prove himself and keep up with his bending counterparts, Sokka sought out a powerful teacher in the art of swordsmanship, Master Piandao, despite the fact that they were behind enemy lines.
And I know one thing for sure. I have a lot to learn.
The humility that he learned from Suki and his adventures thus far seemed to impress Piandao, and he agreed to take Sokka as a student. While at first it was clear that Sokka's swordsmanship had a long way to go, he slowly began advancing, thanks in part to the teachings of Piandao, but also to his own cleverness. He used that same strategic mind he used in battle previously and was able to approach sparring matches in unique and unexpected ways. And this trait was reflected when he forged his own sword, once again taking a unique and creative path.
Do you think we can make a sword out of a meteorite?
We'll make a sword unlike any other in the world.
Resulting in a one-of-a-kind new blade. So when his training culminated in a battle with Piandao himself, the Swordmaster recognized Sokka's knack for incorporating strategy into his fighting style.
Excellent. Using your superior agility against an older opponent. Smart.
And ultimately granted Sokka his approval. Equipped with great swordsmanship, strategic ability, and powerful determination, Sokka was ready to help launch the Day of Black Sun invasion, even going as far as to design new machinery to aid in the attack. But when the time came for Sokka to take the lead, however, the pressure of his new role unfortunately got the best of him.
So, as you know, today we're invading the Fire Nation. I mean, I know you know that, because otherwise why else would you be here? Anyway. The Fire Lord's palace is here. Wait, it's here. And there's an eclipse today. And Aang's gonna fight the Fire Lord. And the Firebenders won't have any fire to use, so that's good for us. And
his father had to step in to pick up the slack. Seeing his father as such a strong leader inspired him even more, giving him something to strive for. And when the day was lost, Sokka learned from his role model the importance of knowing when to attack and when to regroup to try again another day.
We could still win.
Yes, with the Avatar we could still win, on another day. You kids have to leave. You have to escape on Appa together.
We'll be prisoners, but we'll all survive this battle.
But Sokka wasn't ready to give up on his allies, devising a plan to personally infiltrate the Boiling Rock prison to set his allies free. And through use of planning, combat skill, and patience, he succeeded, illustrating just how far he had come. Where there was once arrogance, there was now humility. Where there was once nervousness, there was now confidence. And where there was once inexperience, there was now discipline and skill. So when Sozin's comet came around, Sokka was able to utilize his leadership, his cleverness, and his physical skill, ultimately playing a colossal role in taking down the Fire Nation and saving the world from their destructive campaign.
We need to stay focused on stopping that fleet from burning down the Earth Kingdom.
And how do we do that, Captain Boomerang? I can't see outside of this floating hunk of metal.
Airship slice!
Throughout the series, Sokka was surrounded by powerful benders, royalty, and even the Avatar himself. But he stands strong among these powerful individuals, proving to himself and proving to us that anyone can achieve greatness.
Toph Beifong is known for her strong, unchanging, and rock-like personality. And at age 12, remarkably, she was already one of the most powerful earthbenders in the world.
I never knew. Your daughter's amazing.
How exactly is she so powerful? Let's analyze Toph's many skills and break down how her earthbending informed her personal development throughout the series. We'll do this by focusing on 3 categories: raw power, adaptability, and growth.
You know, the real me.
So let's start by examining the strength and raw power of Toph Beifong. When we first met Toph, it was immediately clear that she could hold her own, able to take down dangerous opponents from the Earth Rumble even when grossly outnumbered. But it wasn't until she joined the gang on their journey that we saw what she was really capable of. Not only was she able to hold her own against even the most esteemed earthbenders, but throughout her travels, she displayed an absolute mastery of classic earthbending techniques, such as rock walls, earth skating, rock armor, earth tunneling, and so much more. When it comes to staple earthbending techniques, there is no question that Toph was an earthbending master from the start of her journey. Even Ba Sing Se's highly trained Dai Li agents didn't stand a chance against Toph, thanks in part to her raw earthbending power. But that's not the only aspect of Toph's skill set that makes her so formidable. Let's move on to our second category, adaptability. Earthbenders across the world are known for their strong, rigid, and unyielding style of fighting. Even Toph herself teaches Aang that to succeed as an earthbender, you have to be rock-like. But what sets Toph apart from the other earthbenders, what truly gives her an advantage over opponents like the Boulder or the Dai Li, may actually stem from her blindness. What many could perceive as a weakness in Toph is actually a major strength. Let's break it down. Her inability to see since birth has forced her to adapt the way she lives her everyday life. For example, since she can't see with her eyes, she learned to harness earthbending to sense the vibrations in the ground, allowing her to assess her surroundings and effectively see with her feet. It's a technique which allows her to better adjust to her blindness in her everyday life, but it's also proven to be a very useful technique in battle against other benders, allowing her to sense and anticipate her opponent's every move. The ability is so useful, in fact, that she even taught the Avatar to use it, and he, in turn, used it to defeat Fire Lord Ozai himself. But as valuable as the skill is, it's a technique that most earthbenders likely don't have, or even know exists, because they never needed to learn it, giving Toph a valuable advantage over traditional earthbenders. Thanks to her need to adapt, Toph also learned that she could use her seismic sense ability so accurately that she could even sense subtle changes in a person's breath, heartbeat, and general behavior, and effectively become a human lie detector.
He's not lying.
How can you tell?
I can feel his breathing and heartbeat. When people lie, there's a physical reaction. He's telling the truth.
Yet another infinitely useful technique, born purely out of her need to adapt. Since the fundamentals of most earthbending techniques are to be unchanging and rock-like, it's not very likely that many earthbenders would be open to new ways of approaching a technique like this. Even Toph herself once condemned Aang for thinking like an airbender.
That's the problem. You've got to stop thinking like an airbender. There's no different angle, no clever solution, no trickety trick that's gonna move that rock. You've got to face it head on.
She may not even realize it, but even though her very identity is rooted firmly in earthbender principles, she also has plenty of airbender-like tendencies that keep her on her toes and give her the ability to evolve, setting her apart from her fellow earthbenders. Which brings us to our third topic, growth. When Toph first joined Team Avatar, it was clear that she was a strong, rock-like, and slightly abrasive earthbending master. And by the final episode, she was seemingly still that strong, rock-like, and abrasive master. But that doesn't mean she didn't have any growth. It just means we have to look a little deeper, because Toph's growth is subtle, but still significant. The most noticeable effects of her growth come from her bending abilities. She first encounters a style of earthbending that she doesn't have a firm handle on in the episode The Library, when the gang comes across the Sandbenders. Having spent her entire life rooted firmly to and reliant on the solid ground, Toph wasn't equipped to deal with the loose and granular sand of the desert like the Sandbenders were. But the Sandbenders were in a sense cut from the same cloth as Toph herself. Their abilities were born out of necessity. The Sandbenders were forced to approach the problem of living in a desert from a different angle than a traditional earthbender would. As a result, they adapted out of necessity to a completely unorthodox style of earthbending. Even though Toph didn't have the need to learn sandbending, she was already familiar with adapting her earthbending. So she was able to hone her sandbending despite its unique nature. This in itself demonstrates Toph's character growth. When she first joined the crew, she shut herself off, claiming to be a loner who didn't need friends. But when her traditional earthbending failed to protect Appa,
I'm sorry, Appa.
she was willing to learn a whole new skill. Could that have been to prevent something like that from ever happening again? To make sure she was always capable of protecting the friends she claimed she didn't need. But sandbending pales in comparison to the most obvious example of Toph's growth: metal bending. Not only did she quickly learn and master the skill of metal bending, but she was the first person to even discover that it was possible.
Have I ever mentioned how sweet it is that you invented metal bending?
You could stand to mention it more.
On the surface, yes, it's a significant addition to her arsenal, rounding out her earthbending abilities and fulfilling her physical growth.
I am so glad we added you to the group.
But it too also speaks to her personal and character growth. When she started training Aang, she held firmly to her ideals of remaining unchanging and rock-like, disregarding all the adapting she's already had to do in her own life. But when Master Yu and Jin Fu forced her to confront an unyielding metal box, they also unwittingly forced her to think outside the box and confront the unyielding perceptions of earthbending and its applications. And after spending her life using earthbending in unorthodox ways, training an airbender with an affinity for finding workarounds to problems, and encountering entire cultures of people who use their bending differently due to their terrain, Toph finally had to directly embrace the idea of being open to alternate ways of thinking. It was only then that Toph was able to think about the metal in a way that no other earthbender in history had.
Woo! Toph, you rule.
Her more open-minded approach to earthbending became an invaluable tool for Toph, even bringing about the very discovery of metal bending. It reflects an idea that's seen throughout the series. We're shown the unique strength of each nation's ideology, but we're also shown that true strength is born out of an openness to each other's culture. Aang learns to embrace the philosophies of the four elements. Zuko learns advanced firebending skills using waterbender techniques. And Iroh shows us that much of his wisdom comes from a deep understanding of each nation's culture.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
So Toph's character growth, while subtle, is vastly significant because it truly embodies that theme. She's able to represent the culture of the Earthbenders, but she also applied airbending philosophies to her approach. She learned to adapt from cultures different from her own, and even learned to challenge the very notion of what's possible. In the end, it's that open-mindedness that allowed Toph to evolve past the perceived limitations of Earthbenders. She encouraged progress, not only in herself, but for the world as a whole.